In the kitchen where the autumn morning sun streamed through the windows, Laura Miller was frying eggs for her husband David. She made it her daily routine to wake up at 6:30 every morning to prepare breakfast for her family. Now in their 15th year of marriage, this quiet morning time had become the most precious moment of her day. "Good morning." David wrapped his arms around her waist from behind and kissed her cheek. He wore the same gentle smile he'd had since their college days. His face, successful in real estate development, showed a peaceful expression that didn't betray the pressures of work. "Good morning. You're up early again today." Laura turned around and smiled. "The coffee's already ready." "Thank you. I'm truly happy to have you here with me." David settled onto the kitchen counter stool and spread out the newspaper. It was his habit to always check the local paper's real estate section in the morning. With the shopping mall development project he was currently working on progressing smoothly, his expression was bright. "Good morning, Dad." Their 19-year-old daughter Emily came down the stairs. She had her mother's chestnut hair and her father's kind eyes. She was majoring in literature at the state university and always came home on weekends. "Good morning, young lady. What classes do you have today?" David looked up from his newspaper to speak to his daughter. "Shakespeare lecture." "I have to write a paper on Hamlet soon," Emily answered while spreading jam on her toast. "Literature, huh? That's nice. Dad deals with numbers all day, so hearing about your studies is refreshing." Laura listened to her husband and daughter's conversation while arranging scrambled eggs and bacon on the table. As a librarian at the local library, literature was a familiar topic for her. "Emily, the library has lots of 19th century literary criticism books, so I can lend you some next time. We have an excellent collection of Shakespeare research too." "Really? Thank you, Mom. You really are a librarian," Emily replied happily. Laura's workplace, the town library, was certainly not a glamorous place. However, she found deep satisfaction in her work providing knowledge and information to the community in the quiet environment surrounded by books. Especially the story time for children was the most fulfilling moment for her. Speaking of which, a new collection of children's books is supposed to arrive today. "There might be some books I can use for next week's story time," Laura said cheerfully. David listened to his wife's story while holding his coffee cup. "The children who hear your story time will probably become book lovers in the future. I think it's wonderful work." "Thank you. You're doing important work contributing to the town's development too." Their dog Max came into the kitchen wagging his tail. David reached out and petted Max's head. "Good morning, Max. You're energetic today too." Max barked happily and sat down at David's feet. This peaceful morning scene symbolized the Miller family's daily life. When the clock struck 8, each of them began preparing to leave. David put on his navy suit with a red tie, kissed Laura as always, and left the house. Emily also headed to university, and Laura prepared herself for a day at the library. "Have a good day, be careful." Laura saw David off at the front door. As she watched him drive away, she suddenly felt a small sense of unease. Lately, her husband seemed a little tired. He'd become quieter than usual and had started going to bed earlier at night. It might be work stress, but she was worried. However, this morning too, he had smiled gently as always and said, "I love you," and Laura felt reassured thinking of her husband. About a week later, Laura had become more sensitive to her husband's subtle changes. His gesture when drinking morning coffee was different from before. David had always had the habit of adding just one spoonful of sugar and stirring it well, but lately he'd been drinking it without adding sugar.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
His way of tying his tie had also changed. He had always used a four-in-hand knot since their marriage, but now he was using a Windsor knot. "David, you changed how you tie your tie," Laura casually mentioned one morning. David stopped his hands in front of the mirror and turned around. "Oh, a young colleague at the company taught me. He said this way looks more stylish." "I see. It certainly looks distinguished," Laura smiled, but a small question sprouted in the depths of her heart. David wasn't the type of person to change his own style based on someone else's opinion. During lunch break at the library, Laura was talking with her colleague Betty. "My husband's been acting a little strange lately," Laura confided quietly. "It's small things, but I notice behaviors that are different from usual." "How so?" Betty asked with interest. "Like how he drinks his coffee, how he ties his tie. And lately, he doesn't talk as much. He used to be more talkative." Betty showed an understanding expression. "After 15 years of marriage, there are times like that. When men reach middle age, they sometimes want to change themselves. Starting new hobbies, changing their clothes. There's probably work stress too." "Maybe so." Laura felt both reassured and still unsettled. That night, Emily came home from university. While preparing dinner, Laura observed her daughter's behavior. Emily also seemed to be sensing something. "Mom, about Dad," Emily spoke quietly while drying dishes. "Doesn't he seem strange?" Laura's hands stopped. "Why?" "I can't explain it well, but it feels like he's not Dad. His way of speaking is a little different, and the way he looks at me feels different from before." "Emily," Laura placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Your father has been tired from work lately. He's handling a big project, so he might seem different from usual." "But," Emily showed an anxious expression. "The other day, he asked about my major. Dad knows very well that I'm studying literature, but he had a face like he was hearing it for the first time." Laura felt something heavy in the depths of her chest. Indeed, David had shown keen interest in his daughter's university life. He couldn't have forgotten Emily's major. When dinner time came, David returned home. He called out, "I'm home," as usual and kissed Laura's cheek. However, their dog Max's reaction was different from before. Max didn't wag his tail and sat at a distance from David. "Max, what's wrong? Come here." David reached out his hand, but Max wouldn't approach. "That's strange." Laura tilted her head. "Max loves you." "He's probably just tired." David gave a wry smile. The dinner conversation was quieter than before. David praised the food and asked about Emily's university life, but his questions were superficial, lacking deep interest. The former David would have remembered Emily's friends' names and professors' stories, asking detailed questions. "How was work today?" Laura asked, trying to sound cheerful. "Going well. The shopping mall project is scheduled to break ground next month," David answered, but he didn't elaborate on the details. Previously, he would have enthusiastically talked about meetings with architects and negotiations with local residents. After getting into bed, Laura moved closer to David. "You seem tired lately. Are you okay?" "Work's just been a bit busy," David answered gently. "Don't worry. It'll settle down soon. Are you feeling unwell by any chance? Maybe you should go see a doctor." "I'm fine. It's really just fatigue." Laura rested her head on her husband's chest while thinking. The voice was certainly David's. His build, his scent, everything was her husband. But why did she feel such a fundamental sense of unease? The next morning, Laura ventured to suggest, "David, how about we try marriage counseling this weekend? I feel like there's been some miscommunication between us lately." David's expression stiffened for a moment. "Counseling? That's not such a big deal, is it? Aren't we happy?" "We certainly are happy. But we might be able to understand each other even better. As a milestone for our 15th year of marriage." "Laura," David took his wife's hand. "I understand you're worried. But I haven't changed. I'm just preoccupied with work. We don't need counseling." Even this way of refusing was different from the former David. Previously, he would have seriously considered Laura's suggestion and discussed it together. During work at the library, Laura couldn't concentrate. While organizing books, she reflected on their 15 years of married life. Certainly, they had matured as a couple, and the passionate romantic feelings had settled down. But deep love and trust should have continued. So why did she feel so anxious? That evening, Laura came home early. David hadn't returned yet, and silence filled the house. Max greeted her at the entrance. "Max, you sense it too," Laura murmured while hugging her beloved dog. It said that animals' intuition is sharper than humans. Max's avoidance of David might be because he sensed something. While preparing dinner, Laura had made up her mind. If her husband was really just tired, she had to support him. She might be being too sensitive to small changes. Marriage has its ups and downs. This sense of unease would probably be resolved by time. When David came home, Laura greeted him with her brightest smile. "Welcome home. I made your favorite roast beef today." "Thank you. You really are a wonderful wife." David smiled gently and kissed her as usual. That night too, and the next morning, Laura tried to believe in her husband. However, the anxiety in her chest grew larger day by day. On a Friday when the October dusk came early, Laura finished her day at the library and headed home. The children's story time event had been successful, and it had been a fulfilling day, healed by the children's smiles. While driving, she was thinking about making David's favorite Italian food tonight. To shake off the recent unease, she wanted to cherish their time together as a couple. When she entered the residential area, she could see red and blue lights flashing in the distance. Thinking there might have been an accident, she drove forward and realized the lights were coming from the direction of her house. Her heart began to race. Though thinking, surely not, her anxiety grew. When she turned the corner, Laura's premonition became reality. 3 patrol cars were parked in front of her house, and an ambulance had come too. While neighbors watched from a distance, uniformed police officers stood in the yard. Laura gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands and parked her car in the driveway. When she got out of the car, a detective immediately approached her. He had a serious expression. "Are you Laura Miller?" "Yes, I am." Laura's voice was hoarse. "What happened? Is my husband okay?" The detective removed his hat and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. This is very difficult to say, but your husband's body has been discovered." Laura's world stopped for a moment. The detective's words echoed in her head, and she lost all sense of reality. "What are you saying? That can't be possible." The detective continued in a gentle tone. "At around 9 o'clock this morning, a man's body was discovered at Pinewood Forest Park on the outskirts of the city. After identification, it was confirmed to be David Miller." "That's impossible!" Laura shouted. "This morning, I had breakfast with my husband. He went to work as usual." "That can't be." The detective showed a confused expression. "Please calm down. Let me confirm once more, when was the last time you saw your husband this morning?" "Around 7:30, Laura answered desperately. "He drank coffee, read the newspaper, and left saying, 'I'm going as usual.' He drove to the company." The police officers around exchanged glances. The detective took out his notebook and checked his notes. "Ma'am, this is very important, but the estimated time of death for the discovered body is from 3 nights ago to 4 mornings ago. That is, Tuesday night." Laura shook her head. "That's impossible. My husband was home on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and this morning too. We had breakfast together every day and talked." "Ma'am," the detective chose his words carefully. "Is your husband at home now?" Laura looked back toward the front door. David's car wasn't in the driveway. He hadn't come home from work yet. "He hasn't come home yet." But he usually comes home around 6. Could we check inside your house? Laura opened the door with trembling hands and led the police officers into the house. David. David, are you home? She called her husband's name loudly. But there was no answer. The first floor, second floor, basement, the police officers searched the entire house, but no one was there. Laura stood there in disbelief. Ma'am, another detective approached. We checked with your husband's workplace, and David Miller hasn't come to work since Tuesday. That can't be, Laura's knees almost gave out. But every morning he went to work. Ma'am, the first detective spoke gently. I think you're very confused, but we need to hear your detailed story. Could you accompany us to the station? Laura could only nod. In a situation where she couldn't understand reality, she could only follow the detective's words. Before being put in the patrol car, Laura called out to Mrs. Johnson next door. She was a kind woman in her 70s who had been their neighbor for many years. Mrs. Johnson, when Emily comes home, could you tell her I'm at the police station? Of course, Laura. But what on earth? David, Laura's voice caught. He seems to have been in an accident. The police station was enveloped in silence. Laura, led to an interrogation room, stared at the detective sitting across the desk. The detective spread out materials and began asking questions carefully. Mrs. Miller, first I'd like to confirm, when did your husband last come home normally? Laura traced her memory. Monday night. He was a little later than usual, around 7:30. We had dinner together, watched TV, and spent time normally. How about Tuesday morning? We had breakfast together as usual. Laura started to say and stopped. Her memory was becoming vague. Had she really had breakfast with David on Tuesday morning? Take your time, the detective encouraged gently. Laura held her head. I'm getting confused. Since we spend similar mornings every day, I can't remember which day was which. The detective took out another document. We checked your husband's cell phone call records. The last call was Monday at 3 p.m., a work conversation with a company colleague. After that, there were no calls or emails at all. But, Laura protested desperately. My husband was home every day. We talked. He was certainly a little strange, but he was definitely. At that moment, the detective's cell phone rang. After a short conversation, the detective looked at Laura with a serious expression. Mrs. Miller, new information has come in. Your husband's car was discovered in the parking lot of a motel on the outskirts. And, the detective hesitated for a moment. Very interesting footage was recorded on the motel's security camera. What kind of footage? Around 8 p.m. on Tuesday, two men who look exactly like your husband were filmed entering a motel room. According to employee testimony, they thought they were twins. Laura's heart pounded violently. Twins? After that, around 11 p.m., only one person left the room and drove away. The other person hasn't been seen since. The detective turned the pages of his materials. Mrs. Miller, does your husband have a twin brother? Laura shook her head. No, David is an only child. That's impossible. However, we need to wait for DNA test results, but this footage could be a very important clue. At that moment, the interrogation room door was knocked, and a young police officer entered. Detective, emergency situation. A man has returned to the Miller house. He's calling himself David Miller. Laura stood up. David? My husband came home. The detective showed a confused expression. Let's head to the scene immediately. This is becoming a very complex situation. Please prepare yourself mentally. During the patrol car ride home, Laura's head was in confusion. She was told her beloved husband was dead, yet that husband had come home. What on earth was happening? She no longer understood anything. When they arrived home, the front door light was on. Laura approached the house with trembling legs. As the detectives watched their surroundings carefully, the front door opened and David appeared. "Laura, what's wrong? Why are the police here?" His voice was certainly David's. His face, his build, everything looked exactly like her husband. Laura tried to run to her husband in her confusion, but was stopped by the detective. "You're David Miller?" the detective asked in a stern tone. "Could you show us identification?" Of course, David took out his driver's license from his wallet. "What on earth is this about? Did something happen to my wife?" After checking the license, the detective contacted by radio. "Headquarters, urgently send a DNA testing kit to the scene. And call the medical examiner too." "DNA testing?" David showed a confused expression. "Why is that necessary?" Laura stared at her husband, but the sense of unease didn't disappear. It was certainly David's face. However, something was different. The way he made expressions, the way he stood, everything was subtly different. "David," Laura asked in a trembling voice. "Tuesday night, where were you?" "Tuesday. I was home. I had dinner with you and went to bed early. I wasn't feeling well." However, in Laura's memory, David hadn't come home on Tuesday night. She had eaten dinner alone and waited for her husband to return. 30 minutes later, the DNA test results came out. The detective stared at the materials with an expression of disbelief. "The test results are definitely David Miller," the detective told Laura. However, the DNA of the body discovered in the forest also came back as David Miller. "That's impossible," David protested. "I'm an only child. I don't have a twin brother." The detective took a deep breath. "Mr. Miller, we need to investigate your birth records. There's a high possibility of identical twins." The next day, hospital birth records were investigated. The results were shocking. David indeed had a twin brother. He had been adopted by another family immediately after birth. Daniel Miller, the detective read from the materials. Born on the same day as David, raised by adoptive parents in Michigan. When we contacted his adoptive mother Margaret Smith, she said Daniel left home 3 months ago saying he was going to meet his real family. Laura slumped back in her chair. All the mysteries were beginning to unravel. The recent unease about her husband was because it wasn't her husband at all. According to Margaret's testimony, the detective continued, Daniel had serious debt problems. He was addicted to gambling and had a total debt of $3 million. There were frequent threatening phone calls from debt collectors, and he felt his life was in danger. David's face turned pale. No, the face of the man who should be called Daniel. No, he tried to deny, but his voice was shaking. "I'm David. I love my family." At that moment, Emily came home from university. Seeing the police cars at the entrance, she was surprised and hurried into the house. "Mom, what happened?" "Dad, are you okay?" Emily stared at Daniel, but at that moment, her expression changed. "You're not Dad, are you?" "Emily, what are you saying?" "I'm your father." "No," Emily backed away with tears in her eyes. "You don't have Dad's eyes. Dad had kinder eyes." Daniel's mask began to crumble. He collapsed to the floor and covered his face with both hands. "Stop it already," he cried out in a sobbing voice. "I can't take it anymore." Silence dominated the room. Laura looked down at the man who wasn't her husband. For these 3 months, the person she thought she was loving was the criminal who had killed her husband. "Why?" Laura's voice trembled. "Why did you do such a thing?" Daniel looked up. In his eyes were deep despair and regret. "I was jealous of my brother. From the first time I met him, I envied his life." He began to speak in a trembling voice. 5 years ago, when I heard my brother was engaged, I was invited to a celebration party. That's where I met you, Laura. Your smile, your kindness, everything was beautiful. You welcomed me as family. From that moment, I fell in love with you. Laura felt her chest tighten. The memory from that time came back. The man introduced as David's twin brother. He had certainly participated in family gatherings several times. But my brother looked so happy, Daniel continued. Perfect home, successful work, beloved wife and daughter. I had nothing but gambling debts and despair. So you. Laura's words caught. Debt collectors were after my life. I had nowhere to run. At that time, I thought if I could take my brother's place, I could have everything. Daniel's voice gradually became smaller. But my brother resisted until the end. He kept saying, "Don't involve Laura." I. Daniel choked up and lay prostrate on the floor. My brother really loved you. Until his last moment, he wished for your happiness. Laura could no longer stand. Her beloved husband had been killed 3 months ago. And she had spent every day with that criminal, receiving kind words and kisses. These 3 months, Daniel continued while crying, every day was heaven and hell. The happiness of being with you and the agony of continuing to lie. Every time I saw your smile, guilt tore my heart apart. The detective took out handcuffs. Daniel Miller, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. While being handcuffed, Daniel looked at Laura. Laura, I truly loved you. But that didn't give me the right to steal my brother's love. I won't ask for forgiveness. Just please don't forget how much my brother loved you. While seeing Daniel off as he was put into the patrol car, Laura embraced her daughter Emily. Both couldn't stop crying. Mom, is Dad really? Emily asked in a trembling voice. Your father went to heaven 3 months ago, Laura answered while holding her daughter. But your father's love is still with us. As night deepened and the police left, mother and daughter sat in the quiet living room. Max approached wagging his tail. The dog's intuition had been correct. He had known all along that man wasn't David. Laura held the true memories with her husband to her chest while thinking about the new life that would begin. The sadness of losing her beloved was deep, but now that she could know the truth, she would be able to move forward. David's love would live forever in their hearts, even though he was gone. 2 years later, on a spring afternoon, Laura was doing story time in the children's section of the library. Today she was reading a picture book called The Cat Who Gave Love. Seeing the children's eyes sparkling, completely absorbed in the story, warmed her heart. And so, Tom the cat lived forever in the family's hearts. When Laura closed the book, applause arose from the children. 7-year-old Sarah raised her hand. Teacher, do people who died stay in our hearts too? Laura smiled gently. Yes. People we love, even when they're gone, live forever in our hearts. After finishing story time and walking in the library garden, Laura looked up at the sky. There wasn't a day she didn't think of David. However, it wasn't the deep sadness of before, but warm memories dwelling in her heart. A year ago, Daniel's trial took place. In court, he spoke in detail. My brother said, "Don't involve Laura," until the end. But I couldn't turn back. For 3 months, every day was heaven being with Laura and hell continuing to lie. Every time I saw her smile, I was crushed by guilt. Laura had complex feelings. There had certainly been unease. But for 3 months, her husband had been kind. That it was all acting, and her real husband was already. Daughter Emily broke down crying on the witness stand. I knew somewhere in my heart that person wasn't Dad. But I didn't want to admit it. Daniel received a life sentence. Before being put in the transport vehicle, he left Laura with final words. David wished for your happiness until the end. I destroyed that too. Please treasure his love. Currently, Emily has graduated from university and works as a teacher at a local elementary school. Once a month she returns home to spend precious time with her mother. "Mom, you look well. Emily came home this day too." "Welcome home. I did story time for the children today." Everyone listens so seriously. "I think Dad would be happy too." Emily took her mother's hand. Seeing Mom making children happy. The two played with Max in the garden. At dusk, Laura watered the flower bed while thinking. What is love? What is family? Blood relation, time spent together, or a true heart? Daniel was certainly a brother who shared the same blood as David. However, he didn't have true love. Love controlled by jealousy and desire ultimately destroyed everything. On the other hand, David's love continues beyond death. The memories, values, and affection he left behind continue to support Laura and Emily's lives. In a solitary cell at the state prison, Daniel was reading the Bible. He had spent 2 years refusing all visits. Every day, he prayed for forgiveness from his brother and atonement to Laura. Sometimes, remembering his brother's gentle smile, he was overwhelmed by the weight of his sin. However, recently other emotions had also sprouted. If he could have loved someone in the true sense like his brother. If he could have known love that truly wished for the other person's happiness, not selfish desire. "Brother, I was wrong," Daniel whispered quietly. "I now understand the depth of your love." Laura's new life flowed quietly. There were no dramatic changes, but she was steadily moving forward. Treasuring each day with David's memories in her heart. A new project had also begun at the library. A reading circle for seniors where she discussed literature with life's veterans. While reading works with themes of loss and rebirth, love and forgiveness, Laura herself was also being healed. At night, while reading in bed, Laura sometimes spoke to David. "Today was a good day too. I think I was able to convey to the children the importance of love that you taught me." The wind shook the window, as if answering. Beloved people never disappear. They live forever in our hearts. That was Laura's conviction. In the distant future, there might come a time when Daniel finds true repentance. But for now, the most important thing was for Laura and Emily to walk their new lives. Surrounded by David's love, their new story continues.